Welcome to Beyond the Numbers, coming to you live on the Joy News channel. We're also coming to you live across all our social media handles on Facebook and YouTube. And make sure that today we go delve into a very insightful conversation. My name is Winston, Tackie, and I'm doing this with
Isaac Ofeje. And tonight, an interesting conversation on the stability, or I should say, the health of the Ghanaian cedis. We've had series of assurances this week. First came from the finance minister himself. You can see him on the smart wall. Second came from the Bank of Ghana, all saying that they have adequate reserves to make sure that the cedi does not have another free fall in this last quarter and in the other quarters that will follow. But tonight we are doing a very simple check for you. It's just a reality check of all these beautiful assurances that we've had so far. So we start with Winston, the finance minister. So he was the first person who spoke about this assurance.
You know, when we had the conversation with the advisor to the central bank on the gold coin conversation, he made mention that there is enough reserves, nonetheless. But we want to also assess the recent statement made by the finance minister in the U.S. during his press briefing. And he made a very simple statement, and I quote, "Don't panic. Bank of Ghana has adequate reserves to support the cedi."
I mean, I remember when I first saw this headline, I was actually happy because I was really worried going into the last quarter of the year, looking at some of the inflows we were expecting. And then I asked myself a very simple question: if we were in a very good place to withstand the pressure that we're going to receive in this last quarter. So there you have it. He gave us that assurance. But let's look at the next slide that talks about, puts our conversation into proper context. This is a very simple question that we keep asking. Does the Bank of Ghana have adequate reserve to support the cedi? Why do we say so? Because everything that the finance minister or the Bank of Ghana is churning out has to do with what they call the reserves. So we decided to take a look at the reserve. Winston, let's go.
So on the Bank of Ghana, we went to the Bank of Ghana data according to what we deduced from most of the facts that we assessed. In 2019, as of August 2019, our reserve was at $8.6 billion. In 2023, we were around $5.1 billion. That is a marginal shortfall of about $2.7 billion. Whilst in August 2024, our reserve stood at $7.5 billion.
Yes. I mean, so it is actually safe to say that as a country, we have actually improved our reserve significantly. By the fact that we're seeing there. From $5.1 billion as of August 2023 last year to now $7.5 billion. At a point before COVID, we were at $8.6 billion. But why is reserves very important? We are talking about all the foreign currencies you have, plus other precious minerals that you can convert or put into liquid when you find yourself in trouble and you really want to make any form of payment on the international space. That is why it is important in determining the health of any local currency. But you cannot actually just talk about the numbers without considering one important indicator. This reserve that you have, what or how many months does it cover in terms of import? Let's look at that one, the next slide.
So in this month, especially the first of the reserve, which is $8.6 billion, it gave us a 4.1 month cover. So within that operation, that was significant then. It tells you that within that system, we had enough to transact any international business or fulfill any foreign exchange related expenditures as a nation. So when it came to us spending as a country in terms of trade, export and import, we were in a very good place. As at 2023 of August, we were having basically 2.4 months import cover. So we could just import with a cover of 5.1 billion, just meaning we had a 2 months cover. But as of this year, August, we were only able to hit 3.4 months cover. That is where our reserves was around 7.5 billion.
I mean, so the reserve that we are talking about, just like Winston put it, if we decide that we are not, exporting anything anymore, we are not getting any form of, foreign inflows, the reserves that we have, how many months can it cover us when we decide to import as a country? Currently, just like Winston put it, let's go back to the previous slide. Currently, we are just talking about 3.4 months of imports. Now, when we were paying our debts, and we hadn't defaulted, and we hadn't done any form of restructuring or haircut, our reserves was able to cover us 4.1 months. Now that we've done a lot of restructuring, we are still hovering around 3.4 months with all this big, fiscal space that we have. But why is this so important?
Yes.
There is the reserve that both the Finance Ministry and the Bank of Ghana are saying that because this is robust, do not panic. But do they really have that sort of, independence to actually control this reserve? And when we need it as a country, are able to bring in, we go into the IMF program proper and look at what they are precluded in doing. Winston, let's go.
In the Bank of Ghana's commitment under the current program, Ghana made assurance to the IMF after successively meeting conditions and target as of June 24. It appeared that the first time we've seen target being met in most of the record was in June target. They gave the assurance, and that necessitated initial reaction from international rating agencies. Fitch came into light, Moody's came to light, S&P came to light, all of them giving us a fair assessment before Ghana decided to go to the IMF World Bank meeting to engage with more external creditors. So what we've seen here is what Ghana proposed to the IMF, that they will limit their foreign exchange intervention to a basic level and also try as much as possible to rebuild external buffers. So talking about external buffers is where our attention is going to be.
Now what you read is very, very important. And for me, if Bank of Ghana will be able to come into the market to do any form of intervention, it will strictly depend on the agreement they have with the International Monetary Fund. And just like you see on your screens, the assurance is that Bank of Ghana told the IMF that they are going to limit foreign exchange interventions. So basically what it means is that when you have the Cedi depreciating, gone were the days somewhere around 2022, 2021, when the Cedi depreciates and at a point where the Bank of Ghana must come in to inject some form of liquidity, they can easily take that unilateral decision. But now they're actually under an IMF, condition. And the condition is that they have assured the fund that they are going to limit their foreign exchange interventions. Why? Because Bank of Ghana has one key thing to do under this IMF program, is to rebuild its external buffers. So it means that at the moment, any form of forex that Bank of Ghana will have, the most important thing that they will be thinking about, or their primary objective, will be to rebuild the reserve that we showed you, but not to do any form of intervention.
As of last week, the Bank of Ghana auction made open dollar auction. It was able to accumulate about $84.5 million basically on the domestic market through auction, dollar auctions basically. And if you look closely, as of today, the dollar to the Cedi is ranging around 17 Ghana cedis, basically. And that tells you a year-to-date depreciation of 24.3% if we are to make that assessment. And that, many have said, is troubling. The key issue which we are assessing is to tell the temperature going into the last quarter of the year, how the Cedi is likely to fare. And already we've seen the central bank trying very well based on the triggers, positive feedbacks, to bring down inflation marginally to 27%. What will happen next will tell whether the next MPC, the central bank, will react differently.
Now, I mean, maybe you have seen what's on your screen and you think it's too refined. You want to see the main detail, what the Bank of Ghana told the IMF in that program. We have the quote here verbatim for you to read on your screens. And Winston, can you read that for us, what the Bank of Ghana told the IMF in the program?
So the viewers need to understand that this statement are official statement from the institutions of which we are making you understand the essence and the practicality of it when it comes to turning out information to the international community. So, and I quote, "We will gradually limit our FX interventions to avoid excess exchange rate volatility and adhere to a gross FX intervention budget consistent with achieving our reserves target."
And the stress this year again.
There's a lot of English there.
Achieving our reserve
targets.
Very, very important. That should tell you that Bank of Ghana's primary motive, right from 2023 till we are done with the IMF program, is to make sure they build a very robust forex reserve or international or gross international reserves. It is not to do forex interventions like they used to do in 2022. I remember in 2022, the cedi went as high as $1 to 15 cedis, 60 pesos or so.
Absolutely.
And in November, exactly.
It will come down as low as 8 Ghana cedis.
In November and December, it actually did come down. And I said that was very artificial at that point in time because...
Many questions.
Yes.
Yeah, many questions.
Yes.
The speed of depreciation or appreciation, basically. Because they were like, what were they waiting for before they could intervene with that immediate magical measures? Why would they have to wait for it to get to that level before the central bank had to step in, use the robust monetary policy strategies, and all the financial terminologies came to light? But now we are seeing that based on what has happened recently, the key issues many will wonder or have to put in mind that the differential of our debt that we've seen ballooning is highly reduced downwards to, or can be attributed to our whole case of cedi depreciation.
Absolutely. I remember somewhere in 2022 where we added about 98 billion Ghana cedis to our debt stock. Yeah. Not because the government actually borrowed any money.
The money was
simply
just
because of exchange rates, fluctuations or differential, just like you put it. So it means that when the cedi depreciates, it really affects so many things. It affects the status of the country's debt portfolio. It affects import values, and that will actually, have a way or impacting on the inflation we have at the moment. When we saw inflation go up marginally in September, I actually attributed it to the kind of fluctuation we saw in the exchange rate, space, where the cedi was losing value around that time, where there were a lot of, should I say, uncertainties as to whether America will cut the rate or not.
It was quite the impact. We made our prediction when we assessed the U.S. forex market and how they projected based on activities in China and Russia. But it seems like our projections really came to light, considering what we said in the first and second quarter of this year.
Now, I want us to look at, it's not all that gloomy. We are not actually, just preaching doom. All we are saying is that we are actually giving a reality check of both the assurances that we've actually received. And on your screens right now is the forex inflows that we are expecting. And based on these forex inflows, the Bank of Ghana and the Finance Ministry are very sure that we'll have a very robust cedi going into the last quarter of the year, which we are already in, and then subsequent quarters that will actually come.
We checked the government revenue stock before we came on, and we were looking at the numbers in terms of the performance of our revenue. It appears just about 4% of our provisional target have been met.
That's the first half of the year.
First half of the year. It appears so far it's kind of challenging for key revenue portfolios to perform as expected.
We saw one of the revenue handles that actually dropped was the e-levy. It didn't meet its target. It has actually never met its target anyway. The COVID-19 levy also dropped. I was shocked about that one too as well.
Well, it was on all products.
Exactly. And VAT. VAT, which is actually the biggest component when it comes to tax, revenue, also didn't really meet its target. This is provisional data anyway put out by the Finance Ministry on their website for the first half of the year.
Check it out.
And so we could not, the difference between what we targeted versus what Ghana actually got was about 1.4 billion Ghana cedis. So the differentials or the difference, the variance was about 1.4 billion Ghana cedis that we could not really attain. But what you have on your screens now is the inflows that we are expecting. That makes both the Bank of Ghana and the IMF very confident that, look, stay cool, don't panic. The cedi, we'll have some sort of momentum. We have backup. The first backup is this 360 million that the Finance Ministry or Ghana is actually expecting from the fourth tranche from the IMF. That will come after the third review, Winston.
Absolutely. So this amount of money, $360 million, is what we're waiting. I heard some experts or analysts saying that this amount of money, the $3 billion, is not necessary based on how much we could have generated if we had prioritized mineral exploration. When we check the revenue shortfall in the especially the Finance Ministry assessment, we realized that minerals contributed enormously in terms of our revenue. The only challenge is that if we are to add value to it, we could have been making more for ourselves instead of going to the IMF. Nonetheless, we are there and we are expecting this amount of money, which will help build our reserves.
$360 million. That is one of the monies that the government is really keeping a keen eye on as we've entered the last quarter of this year and the first quarter of next year. Another money is $300 million from the World Bank DPO2. That's the second tranche that we are actually expecting, $300 million. Meaning, if you add the two, we are talking about $660 million. That's basically significant.
Yeah, that's significant. So these amounts of money going to the third quarter, these are what we will get to. But one key challenge that I foresee, Kofi, as we get into the end of this year, is the enormous payment of debt we have to pay. Government is not still completed with the negotiation with some independent private commercial bondholders. All those,
even the IPPs.
Yeah, IPPs. So all these conversations will come to light. There are still payments owed independent, some of them, and we are hoping that this amount of money will be challenged going into the first quarter of 2024. So I say, and I continue to say, that irrespective of which party is in power, come next year, their government is going to have a serious challenge on their books. So
it's not just about listing the monies, but the key question is, can this really meet our import bill or our forex demand? That is why we brought this figure you see on your screen. We have actually crossed this because there are so many uncertainties around us as to whether we will get this $1.5 billion. This is the Coco syndicated loan target this year. And if you're asking me why we have actually crossed this out, it's because... It should have been
obvious all this while.
Yes, absolutely. Because we have doubts that we'll get this money. And the reason why Coco syndicated loan is so important is that getting into every last quarter, this is the money that the Bank of Ghana or the government uses to stabilize the cedi until maybe we get to the second quarter where, forex inflows will start coming in again. So Coco syndicated loan is a significant component, when you want to determine whether the cedi will be stable or not. This year, there are uncertainties whether we will get this $1.5 billion. Why? Because we do not have the required beans. Or it's simply because last year, we actually defaulted in supplying our beans. And so suppliers or traders have actually put a lot of premium or risks on trading with Ghana. So simply because, if you go, the money is available, but if you go for the loan, they are going to charge you high interest. And I'm sure the government they've done their own computations and they've seen how high this interest will be, and they've advised themselves and say, look, let's come back to the domestic space and do self-financing. But whilst you are doing self-financing, you should know that the exchange rate is also, the cedi is also at stake because you need this money.
The Agri Minister came back to rebut that claim, saying that that is not really the impression. The government.
So what is the impression then?
He has already said it. Once the market received that information, they react. The cocoa market is a very dynamic market. Ghana is a key player. If you go to the foreign commodity market and exchange, Ghana's place and comment from the cocoa ministry triggers enormously how marketers, traders, manufacturers, all of them take into consideration, especially due to the quality that Ghana produces. So, yes, he said it, but what is the market receiving? The market is receiving negative signal from Ghana in terms of how much we can produce going into the next season. Irrespective of the upward review of the prices, that cocoa farmers may benefit, and some are saying that they are still holding on. The key challenge domestically when we come into the farms is the case of galamsey operations, where now cocoa farmers don't find the patience to wait till the cocoa season to go through their fallow season to ensure that enough beans are harvested before they can sell them to international exchange buyers.
Now, if you are watching us at home and you are asking why we may not get this $1.5 billion, it's simply because at this point, illegal mining, which we know as galamsey, smuggling, diseases and other factors are actually causing our production numbers to dwindle. And as a result of that, we are not able to supply the needed beans that we have to, to our traders or to our clients as a country. And as a result of that, we are not able to go to this pool that we usually use to get money from, which is the Coco syndicated loan, that has been the backbone of the Ghanaian economy. We were looking at the data from the Bank of Ghana, summary of economic and financial data, and we saw that this year, there's high likelihood that this might be the first time in a decade that Ghana might not get even up to $2 billion from cocoa, export. Why? Because as of the 8th month, if you look at our, export value, it was below $1 billion. And we have never been at this level if you look at the data in the last decade.
Before I touch on these data, the EDR, European Deforestation Regulation, which has come to stay in this last quarter from December going, that anytime cocoa is exported to the European market, there has to be tracing. The farm, the country, the quality, the water, all of them are coming into consideration. So it appears if you project
the labor,
all of them will come into affecting the domestic price of cocoa in the next future, especially coming from Ghana, where now we know the challenge where Galamsey is in. Now let's look at Ghana's import bill right now. Ghana's import bill as of 2023 stood at $14 billion, basically $5.5 billion,
$3.5 billion
per quarter, basically. And if you look at the asterisks there, it tells you it's a mere projection. You're making a projection of $18 billion. That is basically giving us $4.5 billion per quarter of 2024. And what we are trying to say is that every month, Ghana tends to, in terms of imports, spend about $2 billion in terms of import. And that is how much...
That's the average.
Averagely, basically. So we made our projection based on the first half of the year, consistently to the last half of the year. So we have just some few months to go.
So if you look at the 2024 data, for instance, we have the official data from the Bank of Ghana, right, from January to August 2024. That's about $10 billion. That's our import bill as a country. All the importations we do, crude, refined crude, and all other products that we import into the country, as of August, it was around, $10 billion. Now, if you look at the trend this year, it looks as if every month we add about $2 billion, of import bill to our import bill. So that actually informed this projection of 18 billion that you see on the screen. And if you do the average, that means that comes down to $4.5 billion per every quarter. Now, why is this figure important? This figure is important because we are in the last quarter of the year. And we showed you these values, the reserves, right?
Yeah.
It's actually the reserves.
7.5 billion.
7.5 billion, which is just 3.4 months of import. Now, the reason why this import bill has become important is that if you look at the sources that we are going to get the monies from, what we are actually depending on as a country to stabilize the cedi, one key source, we spoke about this, is the IMF fourth tranche, $360 million. Second
World Bank
is the World Bank, $300 million. If you add these two, that's about 660. And if we were lucky enough to get the cocoa syndicated loan, that would have added a whopping $1.5 billion to that, not even reserve, but to the monies that will be available, not necessarily reserved, but will be available for any other thing. But what we are getting is that from the sentiments we are getting in terms of the Ghanaian traders trading with Ghana, just last year they said just by trading with the Ghanaian government, they lost significant, values because they had to now go into their inventories to go and get the cocoa and supply other people. And restocking became very, very expensive for them. And so if they are going to trade with Ghana this year, what they are actually going to do is that then they are going to charge us a very high interest, and we are trying to avoid that. So basically, all we are trying to say is that if you take out the cocoa syndicated loan, which was projected to bring in 1.5 billion, Ghana has lost a key significant inflow in the last quarter of the year, making that import bill per quarter that you saw on your screen very important. In this fourth quarter, we need an average $4.5 billion to survive as a country. And if you saw the listed inflows, it is not even up to 50% of the monies that we need to keep, to actually foot the import bill at the moment.
Another fear is that the inflation is likely to go up going into the third quarter, subsequent to the first quarter of the year because of imported inflation. We understand that government may at least try to import more, and we're hoping that the access to foreign currency will not directly affect much due to the depreciation we're experiencing. So we're hoping that this signal given by the finance minister may not be realistic, but will actually be realistic.
Yes.
That we have that.
I want it to be very realistic. I really want it to work because when the cedi depreciates, it affects me. So I really want this, measures to be realistic. They have to come out more and explain to us how they are going to keep the cedi in check. This monies that we've seen, what's the assurance that we are going to get them very soon or immediately to stabilize the cedi, especially when it comes to the Coco syndicated loan? What is the alternative? What are we looking at? We saw that last year we had challenges, all right, but this time, we are not even seeing the inflows at all. We are not even seeing any form of negotiation between Ghana and traders.
We'll keep our eyes on the market and ensure that every signal information are made clear to you here on Beyond the Numbers. My name is Winston Tackie, and I did this with
Isaac Ofeje. Will be back same time next week, 5:30. This is Beyond the Numbers. It's a wrap.